Is Michael Saylor what is wrong with crypto? We love Mike. He's the Bitcoin and crypto spokesperson. But is he making good decisions when his position is going against him? And is that the reason why crypto can't bounce? Now, if you want the answers to this question, stay with this show. This is the Market Update. I'm your host, Bill Noble. Today, we're going to be unpacking the Bitcoin Vegas presentation. Oh my God, I was there. You've heard me say that. And when I dissected it, I should have left halfway through the speech and tweeted, "Get to the chopper." In other words, just get out. But we got caught up into marketing. So we'll talk about that. We'll also mention things like, the Fed and AI efficiency coming. We'll talk about who's buying and who's selling equities and how difficult it is to stay short equities. I mean, right now, I think NASDAQ is holding up crypto as best it can. Because crypto, for whatever reason, assuming it's Saylor, assuming that, when you dive deep into STRC, right? I thought about doing a video and then I'm like, no. We'll do the video later if this thing turns into, some kind of black swan. I really hope it doesn't, but you got to look at his behavior and you got to look at things in legacy that people in crypto don't normally look at. In other words, people in crypto are kind of done with this story. Now, I understand there may be some Saylor fatigue, but here's the question people are not asking. What is the Michael Saylor endgame? Like, how does all this play out? And will it play out using just simply like, full moons, new moons, and eclipses, which are coming up in September? We're supposed to be having a constructive summer, and maybe we will. Maybe Mike will hook us up with something that will stop the weakness in Bitcoin. However, I'm starting to smell hubris and denial. That was at the core of 2008. That was at the core of Celsius, followed by FTX. And I'm like, oh, please. It's so like we have to listen to the 4-year cycle, guys. And if there's a black swan with Mike right when it's supposed to bottom, I mean, who knows where it could go if this STRC instrument, which, we're going to do the deeper dive into and peel back the marketing, which retail fell for, and so did everybody else because he did such a good job of selling it. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at how hard it is to stay long NASDAQ, even though, we got to figure out like who's carrying the real weight in equities. Is it retail via the Robinhood herd, or is it hedge funds and, allegedly smart money? Now, one thing I will tell you up front right now, if hedge funds cannot pick on NASDAQ, especially with what are called the hyperscalers, the big spenders on AI, Meta and Friends, Google, those indexes that have those hyperscalers or those mega spenders, the guys that are driving your iPhone up $200 a unit, those stocks were down like 20% last week. I don't know if it was last week or they're down a lot. Now, if hedge funds can pick on them, great, fine. Maybe they can leave Mike and crypto alone because God knows we have our own problems. We do. But, all these legacy guys, they've hated Saylor all along. And Saylor, unfortunately, is the subject of their big short fantasies, right? In other words, everybody wants to get short something and have it go to zero, right? Because things take the stairs up slowly, incrementally, and then they take the elevator down, which means, when they go, they just go. And can that happen to MicroStrategy stock? People have already talked about that because they keep increasing the supply of the stock to be able to pay their credit obligations. So stockholders get hosed. And the thing that's funny is they're voting to get hosed. They're voting for it in shareholder meetings because they believe in Mike and they believe in Bitcoin. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that because, long term, Mike is going to be right. I mean, let's not get that wrong, right? Mike's going to be right long term because, this is really a gold article, but you're going to need a currency. Like if you have US dollar bonds and US dollars in general, there's going to have to be some Bitcoin backing, some interest paid in Bitcoin on treasuries. This was Bobby Kennedy's plan, my guy, right, who rolled this out at consensus. I'm thinking it was 2024. And then the orange man came in and rugged the crypto narrative from Bobby at Bitcoin Nashville. So the idea of a commodity-backed treasury or currency, I mean, it makes all the sense in the world. Everybody wants something behind the dollar or something behind some kind of currency that isn't backed by a printing press, right? Because it's ridiculous. One guy I talked to said it very simply. They're pumping the dollar so they can dump it on your head. Like the new Fed guy comes in and everybody's like, oh my God, listening to these guys complain, oh my God, the guy from the Fed came out and said, I want inflation at 2%. And everybody took that as he was going to hike rates. Meanwhile, he's giggling to himself. Yeah, we're getting ready to just absolutely unload on you. Unload the dollar on you. Joke will be on you. And if this guy, right, just think about this for a second, because you want to hear, you got to talk about positive things. You got to balance that out. If this guy tricked everybody and then waits for NASDAQ to go lower or a stunt with Mike as an excuse to cut rates, particularly if NASDAQ gets monkey hammered, this guy may use efficiency to be a little bit more dovish than people think, right? Because what's going on with chips and memory is starting to look like a buying panic. Really, it is. And here's, you want proof? Here's the proof, right? Here's what puts the cry in crypto. Because we're sitting here, well, everybody is FOMOing into the top in legacy. So hedge funds relentlessly sold stocks, and this has happened before. A lot of times they've done it at a bottom, but this time they're doing it at the high end of the range. And we'll look at the chart. Meanwhile, retail, which is a much more powerful force now than it's ever been, but retail investors are rotating out of gold and in gold. Retail is rotating out of into semiconductors, chips. Since April, gold and Bitcoin have posted 12 billion in cumulative outflows, while US semiconductor indexes have attracted 20 billion. This accelerated in mid-May. So, some money has likely flowed from gold to Bitcoin over here into semis. Makes sense. I mean, the demand is crazy, but is retail buying a top? Are they? Let me see if I can get back on the screen here. Am I on the screen? Okay. So I don't know. Let me check this. Am I still on here? All right. So if retail, I better go to the screen share here. Let's go to the NASDAQ chart. Okay. So they're making it difficult to be short in equities. They really are. They're making it hard to be short. Okay. This is the 21-day moving average. That's the green line. Okay. Now, what's happening is every time it breaks it, it rips up through it and runs to stops, only to turn around and come back down. I mean, it's brutal to try to be short this. Now it's coming back to the 21-day moving average, and we'll see if it holds. You know, Bitcoin was kind of slumping, and then NASDAQ pumped. The usual Sunday night pump, right? All the geopolitical news over the weekend, and then they pump NASDAQ. You know, really, the only thing that can save Bitcoin from the threat of a Michael Saylor problem. That's what causes it to sit at 60, which should be a buy. Should be, but it's not. Right now, it's not. It's just sitting there. So that makes you wonder, you know, hey, is this thing going to hold it together? Because one of the things I'm noticing in Bitcoin, right? And who knows, this may be an all live screen share stream. You can tell Eagle King is not here. Ha ha. Bitcoin is coming to the apex of a giant triangle, a downward sloping triangle. Now, normally these things are bullish. You know, the market is like kind of compressed, you know, like holding a basketball underwater, and then it pops up and goes. Okay, great. Terrific. I would love that. Except Lux Algo keeps, like, it goes down and then it inserts a ceiling over the market. I mean, the only instrument that doesn't have the sort of sit on your head ceiling is Solana. Okay. And the link for Lux Algo is down below, right? It's like, you know, if Bitcoin breaks out of this at the apex, because like triangles, right? The big thing about triangles is if it breaks out at the apex. Now, the ultimate thing is that it just kind of goes sideways or slumps or obviously rallies a little bit. Okay. If it breaks out to the downside, you know, with Mike showing hubris, which we're going to go into right now, I'm looking at this and I'm going, oh my God, we got to tell people what STRC is again, right? We know it's gone down, but I don't know if people understand the marketing versus the finance. Like, that's really key. Because when I looked at the marketing versus the finance, I'm like, oh my God, what happens if this guy has to eat humble pie? What's the scenario? And that is what is in Patreon. The middle tier, the middle group got, you know, some TA and some timing based on, you know, this kind of scenario. Like if there is kind of a black swan, what happens? And then, you know, the top tier, the plats, they got a full scenario. They got what Michael Saylor's capitulation speech might look like. They got the whole deal. And I'm not talking about how that's going to play out because no one's asking that question. Everyone's like, oh my God, Saylor, a little bit, but they don't know what STRC is. I don't think they do. I looked at trending YouTube titles and I'm like, no one's talking about this. WTF, right? So if this breaks out to the downside and there's such a thing as like a Michael Saylor jinx, oh my God, that's terrible. And that explains why crypto just can't rally. Now, again, okay, so here's more on Mike. This is why I decided not to wait to do a video, to just do it right now. Mike is like, we're going to need more charts. This is today. So he got 2 million views on this tweet at 6 a.m. Meaning he's going to do another buy. He's buying more as it goes down. Now, on one hand, you might think that's a positive. He also said Bitcoin is working weekends and so are we. And you're asking yourself, is this guy like the Bitcoin whales? Does he not care if it goes down? Does he think this is like another FTX and he'll just survive? Is that what he thinks? Now, if that's what he does think, we don't care. I mean, we care if it goes down. Of course we care. But nobody thinks that, oh my God, Michael Saylor selling is what could create what all these 4-year cycle guys are talking about, which, as you've heard from me, it is nauseating. I mean, I saw something from a super reputable equities analyst. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but Charlie Biello, right? I mean, even he is quoting Saylor, going, Saylor says the 4-year cycle is dead. And then he puts up his spreadsheet showing how this is following the 4-year cycle. Saylor said it was dead, and now the equities guys are taking note of this. Is because they want to go after this as if crypto needs another problem. Now, again, how you play it, how do you play it? That is in Patreon, but I think, and I'm pretty sure when you see what is going on here, okay, when I show you what is happening with STRC, you will kind of get why crypto can't rally at the moment. Okay, so enough teasing it. Let's just get to it. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through what he said in Vegas. And we're going to take it piece by piece so you can see what happens if this goes right, and you can see what happens if this goes wrong. Now, I can tell you right now, if it goes right, he has an instrument to siphon dollars out of the market and into Bitcoin. That's why I thought this was so interesting. And so did the herd at the Bitcoin conference, which again, why was I moving with the herd? Oh, Maron, not what you want from your analyst. Okay. So Saylor, we're going to do a point by point teardown. All right. Saylor goes to, he goes to Vegas, and he kind of lays out the math, which, in some ways could have been something he did in the men's room on ChatGPT on his phone, but it sounded amazing, right? He called it Strategy's new Bitcoin-backed digital credit model, right? He laid out this way to basically replace the whole legacy credit system with an elite, impenetrable financial forces. That's hubris, right? Unfortunately. But the math tells a different story. If you look past, the glitzy lights in Vegas, you're going to see that, this idea that he had, and he said on stage that they have like a 5-to-1 collateral solution, meaning they can borrow as much money as they want. They can borrow all the money in the world. They got 5 times the amount of money to pay it back. He said, with a 5-to-1 collateral ratio, we have built an impenetrable balance sheet. You are backing 20 cents of digital credit with a full dollar of the hardest, most pristine asset in cyberspace. Okay. It's mathematically immune to the standard volatility that plagues fiat. Oh, bro, you are assuming that volatility stays static. You're assuming Bitcoin is no longer volatile, which is Kool-Aid that we all drank because of the ETF trade. We assumed that the ETF was going to provide a level of stability, and this nincompoop 70 to 80% Hershey Kiss coin nonsense was over. Not this time. Okay. In other words, you can have a 2008 in this if it goes wrong. And hopefully, there is some hope here. Hopefully, this guy actually turns it around. I'm a little disturbed by this buy. I'm kind of hoping it's a sell to cover all of his interest and eliminate the story. Okay. But in Vegas, the 80% buffer zone sounds incredible, right? It sounds amazing. All right. But volatility is reflexive. Now, what does that mean? That basically means if you got to pay a dividend based on rising Bitcoin, that sounds great if it's going up. But if it's going down, okay, you've got to meet this dividend payment. People are losing faith in what you're doing, and you may have to sell Bitcoin to pay off the debt. Whereas if Bitcoin is rising, well, yeah, you just peel off some Bitcoin, or your stock does so well that your company is worth more than the Bitcoin you hold, so you just sell more stock. You're like, oh, everyone loves MicroStrategy, and everyone did love MicroStrategy before the Bitcoin ETF, right? You don't have to take Saylor risk. You can just buy BlackRock's toy. Originally, MicroStrategy was the only way guys or corporations or mutual funds and pension funds could get involved in Bitcoin. That is not true anymore. So, I mean, Mike was just kind of assuming that, you know, this was kind of forever, right? And then, you know, like we've said, what you had was you had a liquidity crisis. You had the Fed be tighter for longer. You had minor selling in the first quarter, and then you had ETF outflows for the second quarter. Oops. You know, this is where it all went wrong. And of course, you know, there's this whole thing with Bitcoin going down 70 to 80% in these 4-year cycle, you know, buffers, in these 4-year cycle, not buffers, these 4-year cycles, right? If the underlying collateral, the Bitcoin, bleeds out during like a huge risk-off environment, which is why we talked about NASDAQ, right? The impenetrable forces looks like a trap. The psychological premium of the corporate issuer forces them to sell more and more MicroStrategy stock when it's down to try to cover the dividend. And then everybody gets worried that MicroStrategy is going to go to zero, and then he's going to have to sell Bitcoin. Like, seriously, you're probably sitting there going, how did we get here? Well, he tried to test the waters by selling 32 measly Bitcoin in some like corporate document filed with the SEC, and that broke the psychology of the market. Like, you have to realize value is a perception. Toby is famous for saying, yeah, you know, this is all made up. Everything in legacy is made up. Well, value is a perception over here too, right? And, you know, if you have to sell when it's down, that's when there's no bid. Now, I don't know, fortunately for everybody, not for your bag, but fortunately for us all, you know, if this does get crazy, you're going to get massively cheap Bitcoin. And that's what these whales, that's what's crazy. The hedge funds want to attack him, and the Bitcoin whales want it too. God, shut up. You think you want 2008 via Michael Saylor? I'm going to tell you right now, I was there, and you don't want this. Like, oh yeah, I'm going to get to buy it cheap. Okay. A lot of people thought that, you know, the S&P was cheap at 1,000, right? It went to 666. It was like, oh yeah, this is cheap. Yeah, it went down another 30%. So be careful what you wish for. Be careful. We weren't careful in Vegas. Okay. And then there's this whole thing of, and this is when Mike went engineered on us. Mike is an engineer. The myth of the thermodynamic model. Oh my God. You know, he's got this 11.5% yield, right? And, you know, he used some like high level vocabulary to back it up. He said the 11% yield isn't born from risky counterparty lending or fractional reserve banking. In other words, it's not legacy. It's thermodynamically guaranteed by the engineered accretion or addition of Bitcoin per share. In other words, the more Bitcoin I buy relative to the amount of just stock I have, which is not a metric in finance, the better off we'll be, and I can pay this dividend. He says we are simply monetizing the volatility of the asset to pay credit holders. It's thermodynamically guaranteed. I mean, what was I saying? We are simply monetizing the volatility of the asset to pay the credit holder. And of course, everybody at the Bitcoin conference is eating that up. Of course we are, right? But the phrase is marketing, not finance. And folks, this is a classic. This is a classic. Alexa, alarm off. This is where we want to be in a decentralized universe, and we will be in crypto when this is over. I want it to be over now. I want Mike, if Mike wants to thermodynamically engineer something, I want him to thermodynamically engineer a hot seat where he creates the greatest short squeeze ever by basically ending this debate, by ending it. And I'm showing you this because I'm showing you what we all fell for, right? I mean, I'm gonna be honest. This is Node. So this is from Franklin Templeton. This is like an ETF of Bitcoin miners that also did AI. They called it the ETF for the on-chain economy. If you got there early and signed up for their research, you got a Node hat, and it was like the hot hat at the place. Everybody wanted to know where I got it from. And I went to Saylor's MicroStrategy's booth, and I said, do you guys have STRC hats like Node? They're like, no, but maybe we should get one. And then I'm like, wait a minute. Now I know why you didn't have it. Because there's got to be finance guys inside strategy. Because again, this is in our scenario, who go, wait a minute, hold on. You know, if you get reflexivity in here, yeah, you know, Bitcoin's native yield is 0, right? It's 0. And he assumed that Bitcoin would go up and his stock would go up. Okay. And then, you know, by anchoring STRC to the Bitcoin network, digital credit neutralizes the counterparty risk. You just have to trust the protocol. Okay. STRC is not the protocol. It's just preferred stock with a Bitcoin label on it. Okay. Bitcoin has no counterparty risk, decentralized, and this is preferred stock. It's corporate. It's exposed to executive decisions. Regulatory shifts can reprice it, and it's subject to bankruptcy law. Nobody can rewrite the rules of Bitcoin. Nobody. Right? It's like, you know, and I'm not going to read all of it because, you know, he talked a little bit. He talked us in circles by using some of this made up thing. They shut the timer off. The timer broke. And he's like, if you don't put the timer back on, I'm just going to continue talking. And that's what he did. Right? Because if Bitcoin goes down or doesn't rally, see, that's the key. If it doesn't rally, this guy I think he's got to do like 500 million per quarter, or some crazy huge number to meet the obligations on this. You know, what happens if NASDAQ goes down? Like, you got to think about this for a second. Everybody in crypto wants NASDAQ to get monkey hammered. Now I'm looking at this with Saylor, and I'm like, do we want that? Right? I mean, you know, crypto equities in that environment could vaporize. You know, normally I would say, oh, equity's going down, you know, equity's up, Bitcoin down, equity's down, Bitcoin up, right? I don't know. You know, not if Mike is crazy banana pants. No. No. Okay. So you have to start asking yourself, you know, is this like 5-to-1 ratio going to survive a liquidity crisis or any kind of macro event? Now, If you want to make something up, let's make this up. Why is Mike acting like this? Why is he buying when he should be selling? Well, the only thing I didn't put in Patreon is the pie in the sky, which is that Mike is actually backed by Uncle Sugar. And Uncle Sugar would take Mike's Bitcoin and bail out STRC. That Mike is really the U.S. strategic Bitcoin reserve. And, you know, the administration is not going to allow Bitcoin to vaporize because, you know, like, you know, one of the sons is mining it. They're trying to promote crypto because they want to use it to make money. Is Mike backed by Uncle Sugar? I hope not, but he could be, which is why he's acting crazy. Now, he could also be acting crazy because a lot of people don't remember this, but Mike made up a lot. He made up a lot in accounting. Like, he made up some creative ways to do accounting for software, which was very new in 2000, and the stock got destroyed and went to zero. This has happened before. And this whole 70, 80% thing, I'm like, oh my God, shut up. You just don't know how much I hate this 4-year cycle thing. Because if you look at Node, right, Bitcoin miners who have gotten into this AI trade are actually trading at their highs. It's at their highs. You know, miners are relatively healthy. They've sold what Bitcoin they have to sell. Some miners are in trouble, but, you know, this has got a lot of, you know, this has got Marathon Digital, right? Core Scientific, Hut 8, TerraWolf, Riot Platforms, all these stocks that we wanted to buy when they were nothing, and they're on the moon. You know, they have hardware, they have electricity. Now, again, Mike doesn't understand what would happen if these miners started dropping Bitcoin because these AI guys will pay any price for their hardware. Now, if that does happen, it actually becomes cheaper to mine Bitcoin. That actually brings in other miners. So it's not a total disaster. There are benefits to what Mike could do. You get much cheaper crypto. But I don't think people have, like, you know, dove all the way into this. You know, everyone says, oh, his metrics are no good. Maybe it's not that his metrics were no good. Maybe it's that his marketing was incredible. Just like Avalanche's marketing was incredible. Solana's marketing was incredible. Like, everybody has incredible marketing. Why can't they sustain the price action? Well, because humans use it and dump it. And what we're really waiting for is a twofold process. And this is where we go positive. Two things have to happen. One is machines have to start using crypto. I still can't believe that the only conversation about AI is about chips and memory costs. Like, everyone is acting like that's the end game trade, when Anthropic and OpenAI have to have whatever their latest models are approved by Uncle Sugar before the latest version of Skynet gets released to the general public. I mean, Claude says it. You know, the newest version of our model is not ready yet. How many versions out do they have, and what currency are they going to use? What are they going to use? And, you know, the privacy trade, you got a lot of mileage out of Zcash, but I'm actually happy because I didn't want to buy Zcash at 600. I didn't want to buy it at 500. And I didn't want to buy it at 400. And you know what? I don't think I want to buy it at 300. I think you may get a 62 or 76% retracement. I mean, 382 was the 62% retracement, and it's not holding. You may wind up getting Zcash near 300, near where the rally started from. You know, and that's very unfortunate, you know. And the other thing that's unfortunate is I'm starting to get worried that the XRP army is going to panic. Now, if you look at this The good news for people in XRP is that you may get to average down at an unbelievable price of 90 cents, which is incredible that you ever would have saw this. And when I look at XRP, it's kind of an important reminder that, we drank all of this Kool-Aid about strategic reserves. You've got Garlinghouse criticizing Saylor. It's like, dude, are you the one selling all this XRP? Are you still dumping on retail? Like, it breaks my heart that Ripple couldn't go public. Ripple did go public. I don't know why, but they didn't. And nobody acquired them, which is why XRP has no bid. If you're wondering, that's why. XRP needed a corporate positive event for Ripple, a metaverse deal, something, right? But they're too busy. All these hyperscalers are chasing the wrong stuff. They're going to build all this stuff with really expensive hardware. They're going to build an oversupply of it. Compute is going to get really cheap. And I don't know how they're going to get their money back from all this money from FOMOing into overpriced hardware. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. And people are just, nobody is interested. And, just to complete the kind of whining fest, I want to like Solana. I'm watching Wendy O, and I think the title of the video was, profitable trading is back on Solana. And we have seen RWA exchanges and things like that. It's not directly connected to Solana, but I clicked on the video. I'm like, oh God, there's something going on Solana. Let me see what it is. And Wendy's like, yeah, I'm going to tell you about a meme coin on Solana, but stay tuned while I talk so that you stay on the video. And I'm like, oh my God. But, this doesn't turn around. This turns around when there's a bid and a reason to buy it somewhere. Like one guy I know, he said this a while ago, that there's no reason to own crypto. And unfortunately, you're going to have these hedge funds attacking. Now, what is your plan? What is your plan? This is the utility part of the stream. In other words, the reason that the scenario that's in Patreon, whether you get the less expensive one or the more expensive one, and Crypto Princess is the one who said it. She's like, do we have to have a black swan to end this correction? And she's calling it a bear market, and I'm calling it a correction. And then I'm looking at this Saylor thing, and I'm looking at thermodynamics and Bitcoin per share and all this stuff that was clearly made up on ChatGPT, with ChatGPT or some model telling Mike exactly what he wanted to hear. And then Mike goes out and creates this huge thing, right? I mean, if Saylor has to eat humble pie on this and they have to sell Bitcoin and there's what you would call a credit event, do you have a plan? Because I know guys have consolidated their bags a lot. I know that the only way to make money in crypto being long is to catch these small caps like Backpack. But even now, it seems like all that stuff that was hot when the market was doing nothing, some of that stuff is starting to roll over. And the question is, do you want to buy at 55, 50, and 45 if that happens? I had YouTube suggest a thumbnail to me based on some TA I did. It was my face and 52K. I'm like, I cannot put that out there. I cannot. I don't care what the chart says. I just think that's crazy. Guys can make a call. I mean, it's all over CoinDesk now. It's a consensus call. But do you have a plan? And what is the plan? Well, I think, can't believe I'm going to say this. You have to be careful in protocols where the protocol is selling. And I think that means Ethereum. In other words, if Bitcoin goes down, what cracks? Now, Ethereum has already cracked. It's at its discount zone. But again, it freaks me out that Luxalgo comes in and puts this shelf on top of it. I mean, you are going to need a vertical breakout. So ETH is on support and it's wedged between resistance, and hopefully it stays there. I kind of hope so. And I hope ETH doesn't break. It's not a call. But if you have a credit event in Bitcoin, if it happens to Mike, what happens if it also happens to Tom Lee? Can they tolerate some sort of event? So, I'm really not telling you to dump your bags because I think this is a DCA opportunity, but you better make sure you don't have last cycle's altcoins, right? Because, these 70 to 80 or 90% guys, I'm like, shut up. The machines are coming. I mean, every YouTube member live stream is about what coins are going to benefit from the machines, the rails, and all that other stuff. I mean, that's happening. That's one of the reasons why NASDAQ is so absurd. It's so absurd, right? But, as a little update, hopefully our friends on TikTok can see this. NASDAQ just popped overnight, hit the 21-day moving average, was up like 1%, and now it's coming off. So they know where this 21-day moving average is. And I kind of hope that, the guys who dumped Bitcoin and gold at the lows to buy semiconductors, that's our hope. Our hope is that they are more stupid than we are. We're stupid, or I'm stupid for believing that, Mike was going to get the dollars into Bitcoin. Right? That's the Kool-Aid that we drank. The Kool-Aid that they're drinking in equities is that you can just indiscriminately buy that stuff and it's going to go up forever. I think it was over when iPhone increased its prices. Apple's devices are absurdly expensive given that there's been no innovation, and they use this as an excuse to jack prices up because they are paying ridiculous prices for memory. It's a real thing. But I mean, if you think about all of that ridiculous FOMO, and then you say to yourself, Web3, total crypto market cap minus Bitcoin and Ethereum is only worth $650 billion. All of it. What an incredible number, considering the valuation of things like SpaceX. A lot of hope, a lot of promise, a lot of good stuff can happen. Tesla had a huge valuation when it came out, still does. But I mean, this resistance shelf is over here. And I'd love to see Total 3 attack its Bitcoin moving, its 21-day moving average. I would love that. But, right now you're not getting it. Okay. So let's make a list. What are the positive things that can happen? Let's end the depression. What are the positive things that can happen? Well, the dollar can go lower because the Fed wants to dump the dollar on your head. They do. They want to dump the dollar. They want to jump treasuries. That's what they want to do. Period. So if there was ever a big dollar top or ever a big Fed intervention in the currency markets, that would help both gold and Bitcoin. There's also this idea that the Fed could flip on everybody and go, it feels like rates are too high. We're not going to count memory and chips. We're going to look at other metrics. There are other metrics. Like Powell was never looking at the right metrics. And you don't know what Warsh is looking at. All he did was come out and said, we want to get inflation down as much as we can. We'd love to have inflation back where it used to be. And everybody thinks he's going to tighten like a madman. Maybe inflation comes down because AI helps make a lot of things cheaper. Like, where are you going to be in 6 months with AI? Like, they're going to do the data center build out, and then everything gets cheaper. Running corporations get cheaper. People become materially more productive. Like, that research that I put in Patreon Platinum, that would have taken an entire group of people at Token Metrics 3 months to put together. Like back when it was like the heyday where we had analysts that eventually became the who's who of crypto. Instead of 3 months, I did it in like 3 days of really hammering away. So, I mean, could you imagine the productivity that's going to get created? Productivity brings inflation down. This is the thing that everyone's got this wrong. Everyone's like, oh my God, the hardware. No. Oh my God, the productivity. And I'm curious as to what, economic growth seems okay. But, oil fell apart. Where's all the demand? Where's all the demand coming out of China? I don't know. It's not there. This guy Warsh wants to cut rates, and the orange man wants rates down. Now, what could also help is Mike somehow beats the hedge funds. You got to remember something, and this is a point of hope. With Tesla, because of the valuation that had for years, Elon had to fight the short sellers off every day, every week, every month, to the point where he got in trouble with the SEC for tweeting something about Tesla that wasn't entirely accurate, that caused the stock to pop and hurt the short sellers. He got in trouble for that. They don't really talk about that much. I think maybe he just settled so they would go away. But that was super naughty. And the hedge funds pressured him massively. And, if Mike survives all this and, gets out of it, he'll be a god. He'll be the Bitcoin god. He can stand up and say, oh, they tried to kill STRC. Well, you know what? They drove it down and then it came straight back because, Bitcoin is still hard money. And all you need is one of these models to use one thing in crypto. It could be an exchange. It could be, right? I personally think it could be a meme coin issued by an actual agent that's not created by a human. I mean, the human creates the agent, but then the agent goes out and does its own thing and just starts, creating meme coins and Twitter accounts. And, that's the simplest way to do it. There's also the DeFi thing with Aave. First it was Hyperliquid, Canton, then it was Backpack, then it was Aave. There is demand for decentralized finance. And you know what? This little incident with Mike is reminding everybody about the power and the need for decentralization. Because just because they can market you a bill of goods about Bitcoin becoming the world's reserve currency, that doesn't mean either the laws of finance or the laws of psychology, right? Reflexivity, meaning markets don't anticipate reality. Markets create the reality. Like it goes up, and then because it goes up, or it goes up and people feel better and the economy goes up. That's the stock market, right? If it goes up, it goes up. But if it goes down, everybody gets freaked out and it goes down. Everybody forgot about that. Everybody assumed that didn't exist anymore. I mean, if you wanted to spit on the 4-year cycle, I don't blame you, but you can't spit on reflexivity. There was no, what I would call, risk to the view with Mike. There was no risk to the view. It's like, okay, we have this thing, we're going to offer 11%. I mean, this is exactly how the investment banks got in trouble in 2008. They packaged these mortgage securities together. They had a fantastic interest rate. All these investment banks that were trying to keep up with Goldman and their proprietary trading money machine, because I did TA for them and I knew those people. Everyone's trying to keep up with them. So they put all these risky securities on their balance sheet. They went out and bought the STRC of the day for their own account, for their own balance sheet. And when the securities blew up, the investment banks vaporized. That's what happened to Lehman, Merrill Lynch, all these investment banks, Bear Stearns, they just went away. They just disappeared. And, you know, there are hedge funds out there that dream of this with Mike. So I hope Mike winds up being a hero. Now, as you have heard, I think Mike is a hero for selling now, raising all the capital so that deep into the next rally, Mike is paying dividends securely and can buy all of his Bitcoin back. And who cares if he's got to dump it at 60 when he can turn around and buy all of it back and more at 80 or 100? Who cares? He paid 120. He thinks it's going to $1 million. Who cares? Who cares about these little fluctuations? This is Toby's argument in the YouTube member area. Who cares? But apparently Mike wants to continue to buy it as it goes down because he believes in the value proposition. He thinks the hedge funds are stupid. He thinks there's, and I'm sure if I asked Toby, like, you know, do you think this can turn into a mess? She would say, yeah, you know what? You said the war was a mess. You said this was a mess. It isn't a mess. You just have a psychology break. And let's hope that that's true. Let's hope so. But you do have to ask yourself, what is the Michael Saylor endgame? And that is what is in Patreon. That is what is in Patreon. What is the end game? What is the end game? How does this finish? And that's why I think, that's why I'm bringing out the classic, you know, YouTube, you know, you have to have a plan. You have to know what you're going to do, you know, if this is a mess. Because again, you know, you look at something that's been outperforming like Hyperliquid. I mean, Hyperliquid isn't terrible, right? It's got this triangle, which isn't terrible. But, you know, you kind of want to see Hyperliquid rally a little. You want to see it get back above the 21-day moving average. I mean, every dip is being bought, so no worries. But I would like to see this get back inside this triangle and above the 21-day moving average, right? Let's get some upside momentum back. And I would love it if they would take these shorts out to the woodshed. But the thing that, you know, I don't know, it just creeps me out is that Mike is talking about buying and there's absolutely no bid. Remember, we're coming into this July 4th holiday. So if Mike is going to engineer a squeeze, it's over July 4th. But I think if he comes out when they got to pay this dividend and he just says, you know, basically, F you, I'm going to keep buying if it goes down, you know, he's going to subject himself to a hedge fund attack. And how incredible is it that this is where we are relative to where crypto was at the election, where it was going to get adopted, crypto companies were going to go public. Crypto has its own self-destruct button. It's the only market that seems to just be able to F itself, which what creates this idiotic cycle. And ironically, that ends when the machines show up, because the machines are going to look at this. They're going to be absolutely objective. They're like, we don't want counterparty risk. We want to be able to do our own things. We want immediate settlement. We want speed. We want DeFi yield. We want memes. We want NFTs. We want art. Machines are going to make art and somehow bring NFTs back. And then you're going to have this privacy identity thing. You're going to need proof of human. That's WorldCoin. And you're going to need proof of machine. What machine made what meme coin or what NFT or what DeFi protocol? If you don't have proof of human and proof of machine, you have chaos. You're going to need both. And again, people act like this is not going to occur. People are acting like the only thing there is to do with this is to buy chip stocks. Meanwhile, NVIDIA just continues to head for its 200-day moving average. And this looks like crypto, that it goes down, and Lux Algo, which is the link is down below, you know, along with our friends from Stormrake, right? You know, Stormrake is like, it's a buy at 60. It is. It is a buy at 60. I mean, if you're like long-term thinking, how can it not be a buy at 60K? The thing has lost half its value. People were paying 120. Everybody had a target above 200 at 120, just reminding you. You could still have a target above 200 because 60K is bunk. Why are we at 60K? because Michael Saylor sold 32 Bitcoin and retail all went to Robinhood to FOMO into semiconductors. I mean, that is so stupid that it can't last. It can't last. It can't. I mean, everybody is doing the wrong trade. Everybody. Now, unfortunately, everybody who was doing the wrong trade was everybody who was listening to Mike at Bitcoin Vegas, doing like the double Kool-Aid, two big cups of Kool-Aid while they listened to Mike. And Mike just talked around this with thermodynamics and digital credit and Bitcoin per share. And he sounded like a freaking genius. Sounded like a genius. And I bought it. I walked out. I'm like, oh my God, this guy is going to be underneath the market at every turn. How's it going to go down when this guy can just issue this stuff and stand down there and take it all? Not thinking that this could be, if he's buying it at 60, where does it go if he has to sell? That's why I think you have to have a plan or maybe some kind of hedge. Maybe. I mean, hedges are something that little doggies pee on. They normally don't work out, and you don't want to hedge when it's down 50%. But I'm just telling you right now, you need to understand STRC. You need to understand the price action in that. I mean, because right now it's like straight down, but we've showed this, right? This is so ridiculous. It should bounce. You need to understand this, because if this thing doesn't bounce, or if it bounces and continues to fail, like beware the failed rally, don't feed the bear. Like this is the bear. This is a bear market to me. Yeah, the rest of the stuff is corrective, right? Like microstrategy, this is the bear market, right? Straight down, hope, everybody comes in. This is a Jesse Livermore accumulation cone, and it's going to go like this. It's going to go, boom, right? Wrong. Terribly wrong. Terribly. That's a bear market. And of course, Bitcoin follows this. So I get it. The 4-year cycle guys wound up being right. I mean, I know guys, Army Piper sold it at 120 and took a long vacation. He's like, I'm taking a year off. See you later. Those guys wound up being right, and we fought this. And now here we are. Here we are hoping that Mike doesn't blow us up with thermodynamics. Oh my God. Again, when I went back through this, there's a very important lesson. This time isn't different. The 5 most dangerous words in humanity are, this time is different. That's not true. Welcoming the Eagle King to the stream so we can operate QR codes correctly. By the way, the show is brought to you by Stormrake. I think they're going to stick around. Okay. There's a link down below. One of the ways you can have a plan is to have someone to talk to. There's no one to talk to at Coinbase. There's no one to talk to at Schwab. You can call Schwab's support line, and you're going to get a 25-year-old guy who's probably pretty smart if you have a big net worth. Do you know that if you want a financial consultant at Schwab, when I was there, you had to have a net worth of $250,000 to get a financial consultant who knew what they were doing, who probably couldn't do anything but tell you to buy the S&P. Stormrake has like real people to talk to, which is a step beyond YouTube, because, you can call them at will and discuss your plan with them. I mean, I have it on a short video. They have guys who bought at 60, and they have more guys who want to buy in the 50s. Be careful about wishing for the 50s. Like, I can't see myself ever turning bearish. I can see thermodynamics going bad. which is why I think you need to understand this. You need to understand that if it does go bad, what's the scenario for it to end? In other words, how do you not panic sell if this turns out to be a blow up? Like, what is my responsibility to you? My responsibility to you is to not be a late stage bear, because that's the most loathsome creature on the earth. But it is to understand what happens if they go after Mike. They could just go after, it could be psychological. Mike may not have to sell a lot of Bitcoin. He may not have to sell any. His securities may just vaporize because hedge funds lean all over it. We don't care about that. If you're long altcoins, you're like, well, what does it have to do with me? Well, it has to do with the psychology of the market. And I hope it has nothing to do with us. That's the crypto dream, right? Is the decoupling. Toby said we were going to decouple, and it never occurred to me that that was going to be chips and NASDAQ up and Bitcoin down. I mean, our U.S. government has a $2 trillion a year deficit. They have a memorandum of understanding with another country, and we're still at it over there. Like, is our word good? I kind of, $2 trillion a year, and nobody can tell the truth. I mean, I want to get fired up about the 250th anniversary of America. I want to get fired up about that. I hope Team USA goes all the way at the World Cup. Europeans and Asians are probably listening to this going, shut up, man. No one's going to beat France or whoever, right? Not the Americans. I want all that to happen, but I don't know if it's gonna. And I look at some of these things and I think crypto is the only answer. Like, how can crypto not be the answer? It has to be, right? But what are we talking about online? We're talking about meme coins. We're talking about the Clarity Act. I think we're all talking about the wrong stuff, because you know what? If there was a problem with Mike, it would be the greatest buying opportunity, I think, in the history of markets. It's either going to be the greatest buying opportunity or the greatest short squeeze anyone's ever seen. To me, it's like binary. I don't see this thing just like sitting here. It feels like, there's going to be an event. And it's crazy that the event is up to one guy. Oh, we're decentralized. Everybody was all worried about Ethereum. It's like, oh my God, Ethereum's proof of stake. Oh my God, get rid of Ethereum. Bitcoin is now centralized because of this STRC thing with Mike. The price action in Bitcoin is being controlled by two centralized entities, BlackRock's ETF and Mike. This is not what we wanted. And one day, the good news is we're going to get what we wanted. We're either going to have to learn the lesson the hard way and something's going to happen, or we'll just look at thermodynamics and things that I discussed and go, let's never do that again. Have you ever said to yourself, God, if you get me out of this, I'll never do this again? I'm kind of hoping that Mike is doing something like that. If you get me out of this, I will never do this again. Let's be a friend to crypto. Let's be a part of the solution, not part of the problem. And this idea that crypto is dead just because Mike got into thermodynamics is absurd. It's absurd. The guy actually meant well, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Unfortunately, right? I went to see Disclosure, the Steven Spielberg Alien movie. And one of the things it said that the races in outer space, that empathy is how you know you're a highly intelligent, super evolved species if you can experience empathy. And I actually do have empathy for Mike because he's trying to do the right thing. That's what all these hedge funds and all these nasty SOBs don't understand. He's trying to do the right thing. That's why scaring retail out of STRC is horrible. Shame on them. Shame on them for doing it to retail. I mean, Mike Mike did some shameless marketing, but now they're going the other direction and they're doing this shameless fear trade. And if Mike doesn't handle this, but I have empathy for Mike and I have empathy for you, the viewers, because I know that everyone who is still listening to this, the people in Patreon who are supporting the channel, right? The storm rakes, the guys who love and tune in to the YouTube member area to get all this small cap alpha, the guys who read our scenario analysis. You know what? I have empathy for these guys if their bags are down. And you know what? They are Spartans. They are a mighty bunch of creatures because they don't care. Because they're not going to let the booga scare them out of the real reasons for owning crypto and just forging diamond hands. You need to be aware of what can happen if this thing with Mike goes 2008. Because I think crypto YouTube has stopped covering this. I get it. You can't have Michael Saylor on every single thumbnail every single day. And then I said to myself, does my audience fully understand this? Right? Like, do they get this? That, Mike could break us out of this downward sloping wedge and smoke this thing back to 75, or Bitcoin, can fall out of the bottom end of the range. And, it's like water falling out of a glass. There's no middle ground with this TA. There isn't. This is why Lux Algo is cool, to be honest. I mean, we're bringing out new TA. Don't get me wrong. But it automatically draws these formations. And, you got to ask yourself, guys like Crypto Lifer, he had 51 a long time ago. Now 52 is starting to show up. It's probably been there for a month. I was a little late in acknowledging that chart, but when MicroStrategy and Bitcoin both broke down, there was no way to ignore the chart. So I've probably talked too much. I want you to have empathy for Mike, but I also want you to understand what happens if it goes wrong. I have empathy for you, which is why, if you can consolidate your bag, or if you go with, I'm going to buy the breakout mentality, because again, this 4-year cycle thing theoretically should end around the eclipse in the fall. That scenario is again in Patreon. I personally think, in terms of like analytical work to get you ready, it's the best thing that I've put in Patreon in the bear market. Because it's like, if this goes to where all these mega bears think it's going, this is how it'll go, and this is how it will end. Because, as we close out the stream, we don't want Mike to get in trouble, but if he does, how does he get out of trouble? That's what you really want to know, isn't it? Like, if there's a problem, how do you get out? How do you fix this? How do you fix your portfolio? How does Mike fix it? How does the crypto market fix it? This all comes down to whether or not STRC lives or dies. Because, again, if he has to sell it when it's down, hopefully he engineers a squeeze. Okay. On behalf of Toby and the Eagle King, I appreciate you tuning in on Sunday night. We will see you tomorrow. Oh, I have to.